And welcome back to the show where we have a very, very special guest on the line right now. Director Scott Hicks has put together a brilliant brand new documentary called The Musical Mind, A Portrait in Process. And we thought we want to get to know this film a little bit more. So let's actually get Scott on the phone right now to chat a little bit about it. Welcome to the program, Scott.
Hi, David. How are you going?
I am really well, Scott. We are so honoured to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on to chat about this documentary. And I guess to start off, tell us a little bit about where the idea for this documentary came from.
Oh, sure. Well, it was really, it was with the approach of what was the 25th anniversary of my movie Shine, sort of back in the 90s, which was based on the life of David Helfgott. And I thought it would be good to go and revisit David all these years later. I'd stayed really good friends with him. He was someone who'd had a very troubled childhood as a brilliant child prodigy, and had performed internationally, but sort of had suffered from a breakdown. And but we'd been very good friends ever since. And I wanted to sort of show people what a wonderful career he's enjoyed since the movie Shine. And along the way, I thought, well, why not connect with several other musicians who were linked with Shine, people as varied as Daniel Johns. There was Ben Folds, who was living in Adelaide at the time. There was Simon Tedeschi, who's a classical pianist, and as a child prodigy, his hands had appeared in Shine as the young David Helfgott. So I thought, why not sort of visit all these musicians and see if we can just have a conversation with them about what their processes are and how do they imagine their music and what drives them and what all those sorts of things that really do fascinate me about musicians. So that's really where it began.
Scott, it surprised me when I heard it was the 25th anniversary of Shine. It feels like only yesterday when I sat down to watch the film for the first time. Does it feel like 25 years for you?
It's hard to know where the time has evaporated, but it's true. The film sort of still has a very strong life. It's being re-released in various territories. It just seems to have a kind of evergreen quality to it. There's no accounting for that in a way, but no, it was certainly. It's been quite extraordinary to watch that time advance. That's a quarter of a century. Let's face it.
So tell us, what was Ben and Daniel and of course David's response when you first went back to them and said, "Hey, I'm putting together this film and I want to work with you again"? What were their reactions to that?
They were very intrigued and interested, and I didn't really know what the journey would be. I guess that's part of the nature of documentary. You embark on it in order to discover something, if you like. But I just felt that inherently they were four fascinating people, and that the stories that would come out would have a thread to them. And you don't always know what that thread is going to be. That's the kind of the fun and the terror of making a documentary. But as it turned out, of course, they're such intensely creative people. They also have wicked senses of humor, which I think is fascinating. So they don't take themselves, over seriously. They take music very seriously. But as people, they're very warm and sort of connected. So that was really where I started. And what was most important to me was that it feel like a conversation with them, not a sort of formal interview. Because, you think of someone like Daniel Johns. I mean, since he was 12 years old, he's been interviewed by everyone on the planet, and thousands of times the same questions. There are pre-programmed responses that will come out automatically. So it's really important to avoid that sense of my question, your answer, my question, your answer. It becomes a conversation, and you only do that by hanging out.
Yeah.
And so as they were people who I had a really good connection with. I mean, they were prepared to let me do that with them, and trusted the outcome. So that was the process for me.
Scott, what kind of things did you learn during those conversations? Were there things that really stuck in your mind when you sat down to chat to these amazing people?
Oh, absolutely. I think perhaps the most powerful thing was the extent to which they are all absolutely driven by music. Each of them discovered it for themselves as a child, as a tiny child. I mean, Ben Folds, when he was 2 or 3 years old, would sit with a little 45 RPM record player, playing and listening to music for 8 hours a day as a toddler. He was obsessed. David Helfgott was playing Rachmaninoff at the age of seven. You know, his fingers couldn't extend to read the full chords. You know, so they all had this really early discovery of music, which was quite spontaneous, I think, for each of them, and that I found really fascinating. You know, where does you sort of think, where does it come from? Well, at the same time, the music has been their obsession and has sort of possessed them as well. I mean, it's been a really interesting symbiosis, if you like, of a relationship between them and their music. But the most important quality, I think, was that music has been a sort of redemptive power in their lives, because they each I think they're each fully aware that they have some form of neurodiversity, if you like. I mean, they think about things in a very unique way, and music has been the outlet for that, and the product of that we are all lucky enough to enjoy. And it's a celebration of that neurodiversity, if you like, rather than, you know, it's a superpower. They have a superpower. And they found it for themselves. That I think was the most profound thing for me, was that sort of discovery.
So I guess that leads me to want to ask, where did your discovery for music come from as well? Music has played such a big part of your film career. When did your love of music begin, and what kind of music drew you into the world of music?
It's a strange thing, because, I mean, as a child, I went to boarding school from a very early age, and, and this is back in the sort of early 60s, and the only thing that I was exposed to, in a sense, was the piano. And I begged my parents for piano lessons because it seemed like a really interesting thing to do. And I studied piano for quite a number of years. Well, I say studied, I played it. But by the time it got to the point where I needed to take it seriously, I didn't really have the application for that. And I kind of let it drop away. In some ways, my whole film career has been a sublimation of that failed pianist, if you like. And music, it's not been a conscious thing, but it just seems to have infiltrated my consciousness in a way that has motivated me and has worked really well in my film world, if you like.
Yeah.
Sometimes as obviously as when I was making, film clips for In Excess, although, 40 odd years ago, although it's amazing to even utter those words, but, it's music and film are so powerfully related as they're both a kind of international language in a way. I mean, I'm talking of pure cinema, where the image tells you a story even if you don't know the language of the people in it, if you know what I mean.
Definitely.
Not like, Alfred Hitchcock remarked when he first went to America that American films were just photographs of people talking, which is true of a lot of, big Hollywood pictures. But European cinema in particular, and the most interesting American cinema too, the image conveys a story, and music conveys its own story, and across the boundaries of international language. So maybe somewhere in there is a thread of an idea of why that has been so important to me. It's been completely unconscious, but I think it has been a motivating factor.
Definitely. Scott, I know we have a lot of young filmmakers who listen to this show, and hearing you talk about this would be something that I'm sure a lot of them would find fascinating. You said that you wanted to approach this documentary and make it feel like it was a conversation rather than an interview. As a filmmaker, how does your process differ when you approach a documentary to, say, a feature film?
Well, it's interesting. There are sort of the longer I've gone on, and the older I've gotten, the more I've done, the more related and connected the two apparently disparate strands are. And maybe that's partly because a lot of the feature film and narrative cinema, if you like, that I've made has had its origins in true life stories. From Shine, through Snow Falling on Cedars, through to The Boys Are Back with Clive Owen, and these are things that are based on memoirs and based on people's lives or whatever. So that's always been interesting. That's been a strong connection, because what I've tended to do is make documentaries often in between narrative cinema, but they really come from the same source in a way. Even if you're making a scripted drama, the truth is that the story often lies even in the editing room. It may be more obvious, the bones of it are there, but how you tell it and the way you lay it out for an audience is something that you can still discover. It's not as simple as just shooting what's on the page and then cutting it all together and there you go. I mean, who would need a director? If that was the case, it would just make itself. So it's a journey of discovery of what is your story, what are the threads, how can you connect them, and how can you lead the audience through those threads. I don't know if that sort of answers your question, but it just
it does.
Seems to me it's true of filmmaking as an art or as a profession.
Definitely, and I'm sure a lot of the young filmmakers out there will take those words of wisdom on board, because that is great advice. Scott, the other thing too, you're presenting this film with some Q&As around Australia as well. How excited are you about being able to head out into cinemas and actually be able to talk to the general public about this film?
Oh, look, I mean, I do enjoy those sessions. We've got ones coming up in Sydney and Melbourne on the 25th and 26th of the month, and I really do enjoy that interaction with an audience, and finding out. Because sometimes you find out things you didn't know about the film, or about how people have taken what you've presented to them. So it's a really educative process for a filmmaker to hear directly from an audience, what they think of the film. And sometimes people can be pretty blunt, but equally they can be utterly engaged in what you've done. So I look forward to that. It's a valuable thing to be able to hear from people and learn what their response is. So I hope to see audiences out there who want to come along and have a chat about the film.
Definitely. From the filmmaker's point of view, what are you hoping that people will take away from this film?
Gosh, I think I hope they sort of share my fascination with the fact that these individuals these great musicians of Daniel Johns and David Helfgott and I mean Ben Folds and all the for all their variety and their disparate nature, they have found in music a passion and a sort of a redemptive sort of quality, which is a way of dealing with the complex sort of neurodiversity, I think, that each of them has, which is like a kind of superpower that they actually have managed to distill into this element, this musical element that delights us all. I think that's, for me, the really fascinating thing. They've channeled those disparate feelings and reactions to the world that they live in, their obsessions. They've managed to filter them into wonderful things that we are able to enjoy through that international language of music.
Awesome. So, Scott, we are running out of time very, very quickly. So to finish off, what would you like to say to everybody out there before they head out into cinemas to check out this amazing film?
Come and enjoy and surprise yourselves, because these four musicians, and by the way, there are other people in the film too. There's an extraordinary portrait artist, Laurabelle Swarovski, who creates portraits of them as a thread, sort of ligaments that run through the film. And there's a wonderful, incredible, inspirational music teacher called Annie Phelan, who discovers talent in the school children amongst her, which is really it's a really powerful thing. So it's a journey into the musical mind, but a journey that's not explained by scientists. It's not even explained by artists. It's demonstrated to us through their passion and through the work that they create. I hope that's not too complicated for a response, but I hope that people will feel something of that when they see the film.